Let us continue with yesterday's discussion, where we have discussed about phenomenology and how the reception theory by Hans Robert Yoas and how Yoas questioned certain interpretations and how he developed an idea of horizons of expectations and what it means by horizon of expectations we have discussed yesterday. Certain questions Yoas raised in this regard and tried to point out that can we able to have a survey of the successive horizons which flow from time of work down to the present day and then with an Olympian detachment to sum up the work's final meaning. Then he raised the question on this. To do so, can we ignore our own historical situation? Whose authorities are we to accept? That of our first readers. Whose authority are we going to accept? The combined opinion of readers over time or the aesthetic judgments of the present? He raised so many questions about the horizons of expectation. And then we yesterday stopped at the point where the questions which have derived from the queries that Yoas asks, the answer we can get it from hermeneutics. Hermeneutics, which was discussed very elaborately by Hans Georg Gadamer, who is the follower of Martin Heidegger. Gadamer argues that all hermeneutics, that all the interpretation of past literature arise from a dialogue between past and present. Now, our attempt to understand any work or a particular work will depend upon the questions which our cultural environment allows us to raise these questions. What is our cultural environment? Cultural environment of everyone is different. It is not common. Cultural environment vary from person to person. It is not the same cultural environment that you are talking about or we are talking about. When you try to understand any work, this cultural environment plays a crucial role in understanding any of the subjects, any of the topics, any of the work. But at the same time, we seek to discover the questions which the work itself was trying to, you can say, get it, with the work itself trying to get from its own dialogue with history. The work itself tried to find out certain answers in the form of dialogues with the history. Our present perspectives always involves a relationship to the past. This is all the time happens. Because what is our present perspective of certain things? That is shaped because of certain ideas that we have received it from the past. But at the same time, again, we will find out the past can also be grasped through the limited perspective of the present. Understand, both the things are depend upon each other. Present is a present perspective involves a sort of relationship to the past. At the same time, past can only be grasped through limited perspective of the present. Put it in this way so that we can able to understand it comfortably. Put it in this way. The task of establishing knowledge, establishing a knowledge of past, it seems to be hopeless because you cannot establish a sort of knowledge of past. There are certain limitations of it. You cannot establish it. You cannot bring it. That is somehow seems to be difficult, and that's why you are getting hopeless of it, that we cannot able to establish a knowledge of past. How much you can able to get it? There are certain limitations of human minds. You cannot avoid it. You cannot say that I can remember each and everything of the past. But the hermeneutical notion of understanding, please understand this. The hermeneutical notion of understanding does not separate knower and the object in the familiar fashion of empirical science. It does not separate the knower, the one who knows the thing, and the object in the way the familiar fashion of empirical science, how you collect the data. Rather, it views understanding as a fusion of past and present. Hermeneutics or hermeneutical notion of understanding makes a fusion of past and present. It makes a fusion of past and present. We cannot make our journey into past without taking into consideration the present with us. How can we take our journey into the past if we don't understand the present? We need to have this present always known to you very comfortably so that you can able to understand the past. Past separately cannot be understood. The fusion of past and present. Because journey into the past without taking present with us is impossible, or you are trying to establish a knowledge of the past seems to be hopeless. So what is the only condition remaining? The only condition remains is that you have to make a fusion of past and present. And the fusion of past and present can able to make you to find out certain questions, answers to the questions raised by you ask, which we have discussed yesterday also, and which we have started with it today. Hermeneutics, basically, my friends, if you try to find out, hermeneutics was actually originally a term applied to interpretation of sacred texts. Hermeneutics was a term originally applied to the interpretation of the sacred texts. Now its modern equivalent preserves the same serious and reverent attitude. It is not dropping its serious attitude. It's not dropping its reverent attitude. Because when you try to interpret sacred text, you need to be very serious. You should have a very reverent attitude. In modern times, the same seriousness, the same reverent attitude is preserved to study the secular texts to which it trying to gain access. If you want to try to get access to the secular text, you have to use the same serious approach or same serious reverent. The same attitude as you have the attitude for that particular thing in your sacred text. You have to follow the same attitude. You have to follow the same thing. Yuas recognizes that a writer may directly affront the prevailing expectations of his day. He will face the same expectation that of his days. The writer may always face such type of things. If you say that, how can writer get away from it? No writer cannot get away from it. The writer directly affront the prevailing expectations that of his days, whatever the days he may have. All those days are coming in front of the writer. Now the reception theory, which was developed in Germany in 1960s in a climate of literary change, German writers such as Roald Hochhuth, Hans Magnus Enzensberger, or Peter Handke, these writers were challenging the accepted literary formalism. Because in literary formalism, there is a direct involvement of reader. Literary formalism. They were challenging the accepted literary formalism by increasing direct involvement of the reader, or you can say audience. They're increasing direct involvement of the reader. Yours examines himself the case of the very famous French poet Baudelaire. Baudelaire's very famous poem Les Fleurs du Mal, which has created uproar and attracted legal prosecution by offending the norms of bourgeois morality in 19th century, and challenging the canons of romantic poetry. There is a legal prosecution faced by the poet after writing this particular poem. The poem also immediately produced a new aesthetic horizon of expectations. Please remember horizon of expectations that we discussed yesterday. We are trying to find out the meanings from the past, and it varies from reader to reader. My past is different from your past. You may get some different sort of understanding and meaning out of it. I may get some different understanding and meaning out of it. You are going to find out the different meanings out of it. So the poems written in Les Fleurs du Mal immediately produced a new aesthetic horizons, and the literary avant-garde, the literary stalwarts saw the book as a trailblazing work of decadence. The poem were concretized as expressions of aesthetic cults of nihilism. The poems were considered later on because of the horizon of expectation. They are the following the aesthetic cult of nihilism, cult of aesthetic cult of nihilism. Nihilism in Marathi, it's called a Shunyavad. And that's why the whole legal prosecution that was created on Baudelaire's poems, the horizon of expectation gave it some different understanding and direction. And you ask, later on interpreted Baudelaire's poem from psychological, linguistic, and sociological perception. He interpreted the poem from these perceptions, and often disregards them. This disregard, casting a doubt upon a method, the method which recognizes its own historical limitations, the method which realizes its historical limitations, which he has used for this particular poem's horizon of expectation. It has got its own historical limitations. Still, feeling able to regard certain other interpretations as raising falsely posed or illegitimate questions. The fusion of horizon is not, as it seems to be, a total meaning of all the points of view. It is not a total meaning of all the points of view which have been arisen you can say which have arisen hermeneutical sense hermeneutical sense of the critique, and this appear to be part of gradually emerging totality of meaning which make up the true unity of the text. Please understand this. The fusion of horizons, which is supposed to merge all the points of view which are coming out of hermeneutical sense of the critique. It try to merge all these things, fusion of horizons, which are coming out of the total meaning, which is trying to unite the text itself with the help of the meaning. The fusion of horizons is not doing that much, is not doing that thing properly. It is not reaching to what it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to reach. It's supposed to reach to get a true meaning of the text. But this fusion of horizons is not reaching to that particular. And that's why another idea that needs to be part of reader response theory or criticism. Another leading exponent of German reception theory and a member of Constance School is a very prominent theorist named Wolfgang Iser. Wolfgang, Wolfgang Iser, Iser. What he did? Iser draws heavily on the phenomenological aesthetician named Roman Ingarden. He draws most of his idea from Roman Ingarden. And on the works of Gadamer, which we have seen, different works that Gadamer, who was the follower of Martin Heidegger, who wrote a book in 1975, Truth and Method. He was trying to find out all the answers from the two prominent aestheticians, Roman Ingarden and Gadamer. Now, Iser did not follow Yoas's method. What he did, he decontextualizes and dehistoricizes text and reader. He has not mixed two things together. He decontextualizes both and dehistoricizes reader and the text. And a key work, he building on an earlier book, the Implied Reader in 1974, he wrote another book, The Act of Reading, a theory of aesthetic response, published in 1978. In this book and elsewhere, Iser presents the text as a potential structure which is concretized by the reader in relation to his extra literary norms, values, and experience. Because when reader reads, he tries to use his extra literary norms, values, and experience to build up the meaning of that particular text. Iser pointed out that a reader, when he reads, when a reader concretizes with the help of his own experiences, a sort of oscillation is set up between the power of the text to control the way it is read. It is the power of the text which controls the whole concretization of the reader's understanding of the text with the help of his own extra literary values, norms, and experience. And his experience, the reader's experience, which will itself modified the act of reading. It modified the whole act of reading. Meaning, in this theory which Iser proposed, lies in the adjustments and revisions to expectation which are brought in the reader's mind when he is in the process of making sense of his dialectical relationship to the text. A sort of relationship, dialectical relationship, when the reader is trying to make with the text. He is making certain adjustments and revisions of it. And because of those adjustments and revision, the meaning is in between those adjustments and revision of the experiences and text. Iser himself does not entirely resolve this relative weight of the text's determinacy, my friends. He is not entirely resolving the reader's experience in this particular relationship. Although it would seem that that his emphasis falls more heavily on this second part, where he is trying to create a reader's experience in the relationship of resolving the text determinacy. In Iser's view, the critic's task is to explain not the text as an object. Critic need not to explain the text as an object, but he should talk about its effects on the reader. What sort of effects this text will carry? It is in the nature of the texts, because the text most of the time provides the spectrum of possible reading. Text provides spectrum of possible reading. The term reader, friends, can be subdivided into two categories: implied reader and actual reader. Who is the implied reader? Implied reader whom the text creates for itself and amounts to a network of response leaving structures. It tries to build up a response leaving structures which predispose us to read in a certain way. It makes us to read it in certain ways. The structure of the text makes us to read it. That is what an implied reader, that is what when writer writes, he has certain implied readers in front of his eyes. And he creates text in such a way that this text itself creates a network of response inviting structure. It creates a structure which will give response to it. The text itself can. And this is what an implied reader means. Implied reader, that is what writer, when he's writing certain things, is having certain implied readers in his minds. And this implied reader can able to find out the meaning within from that structure, which structure has decided on its own. And the actual reader receives certain mental images in the process of reading. This you can also experience. Not only I am saying this, you can also experience this. You can also find this. That when you read a particular text, certain mental images appears in front of us while we are reading certain things. Now these images which are coming, these images will inevitably colored by readers' existing stock of experience. How those images are coming? Those images are coming simply because of the existing stock of experience that your mind is having with you. With those existing stock of experience, you are trying to bring all those images while reading a particular text. Now, for a moment, please remember the poem which we talked a couple of days back. A poem by William Wordsworth. I hope that you remember it. Now, if you try to find out a meaning from William Wordsworth's poem as an actual reader, if you are a religious person who believes in religion, who believes in God, who believes in the whole system, then the meaning of the poem for you is something different. And if you are atheist who doesn't believe in God. If you are atheist, the meaning of the poem is different for you. The experience of reading, my friends, will differ according to our past experiences. The meaning of the experience of reading, the meaning which you derive of a text. The experience of reading will differ always according to our own past experiences. And that's why I said meaning of a text vary from reader to reader. You cannot say only the same meaning will continue for all the readers. No. This is what we are expecting in the postgraduate classes, that the students should derive their own meaning of that particular text. And we cannot say that what we are saying is the only meaning of the text. Not at all. The student need to get the meaning of the text by themselves, and that's why most of the time in postgraduate classes you will find out that the teaching is not as you have experienced it in your graduate classes. No one is going to teach you line by line, every line of everything. No. They will put a general meaning of that text in front of you and what are the critics' opinion regarding to it, and they will put the text open to you for your own understanding. You need to find out your meanings. You need to find out your understanding of it, and that is the exercise you need to apply when you are studying, when you are reading texts for your studies. And if somebody asks why, because you will find out the meaning in the Wolfgang Iser proved it with his very famous reception theory, pointing out that the reader or the experience of reading will differ according to our own past experiences. But unfortunately, what happens? Most of our PG students, they rely on what one meaning you get it. We never try to find out our own meaning. That's why most of the time we used to say to our students that please read the original text at least once so that you can be able to understand the meaning of that particular text. And that's why post-graduation in English requires a lot of reading, my friends. If you say that I will read only the text related to the examination and we'll read only the material available on internet and then we are going to get good marks, okay, you will get marks as per the system. But you cannot stand on yourself if somebody tries to ask you certain question. Because you have to interpret, you have to find out, you have to develop your own understanding. Find out the meanings of the text. The words we read do not represent actual object, but human speech in fictional guise. It was human speech in the form of fictional concealment. It was hidden. And you have to find out this particular thing. Because the fictional language, my friends, always helps us to construct in our mind imaginary objects. The fictional language constructs lots of imaginary objects in our mind. Iser took one example from a very famous English novel written by Henry Fielding called Tom Jones. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Tom Jones. If you are not, please try to search it and understand it, what exactly Tom Jones is. A very interesting novel, Tom Jones. It is called as a picaresque novel. Now, in Tom Jones, this was the example given by Wolfgang Iser in making you to understand the idea of fictional language which constructs certain images in our mind. Henry Fielding, in his novel, presents two important characters. Alworthy. Alworthy is a very perfect man. And another character, Captain Blefield. Captain Blefield is the hypocrite. Now, these are the two characters he has created. The reader's imaginary object, the reader's imaginary object of perfect man, is subject to modification. It depends upon your ideas of perfection, what you call it as a perfect man. My idea of perfect man may be different from your ideas of perfect man. We are not following the same concept of perfect man altogether. It varies from person to person. When Allworthy is taken in by Blifil's fringed pity, we adjust immediately the two imaginary object in which that the idea of perfect man, we have an idea that perfect man lacks of judgment. Perfect man cannot take judgment very properly. It will change, it will modify the idea of perfect man immediately. We can do a control. Perfect man is, if you try to ask someone that he's complete in all the sense. But certain situations in the novel makes you to understand that this perfect man is lacking in his taking judgment. Again, you modify the image in your mind that, okay, perfect man is not able to take judgment properly. And the reader's journey in reading throughout this book is a continuous process of such adjustments. We try to adjust immediately. Certain idea is in our mind about perfectness. And when we read, we adjust the whole idea immediately. There's a complete journey. When you read a complete novel, there is an idea of adjustment. We try to adjust everything. Now, the reader's journey, if you see, we hold in our minds certain expectation. As I said, expectation of perfect man. There are certain ideas in our mind. Those ideas were based on the memory of characters or certain events that we have experienced. But the expectations are always modified. Expectations are not permanent. Expectations are always modified. And the memories, it transformed. Memories are transformed as we pass through the text. As we move through the text, the memories are transformed immediately. What we grasp as we read is only a series of change of viewpoints. Continuously we change our viewpoints. Those viewpoints are not fixed, please understand it. And they are not fully meaningful at every point. They are not meaningful at every point. While a literary work, my friends, does not represent objects, it does refers to the extra literary work, literary world, extra literary world by selecting certain norms, by selecting certain value systems, by selecting certain worldviews. These norms are concepts, concepts of reality, which help human beings to make sense of their experiences of chaos, because we are always in a chaotic situation. These texts helps us to come out of that chaotic experiences and form a concept of reality. In fact, we can say that the text adopts a repertory of such norms, repertory where you rehearse, where you practice, where you try to change certain things. And it suspends their validity within the fictional world. You cannot have a validity in the fictional world. It is suspending all the validity of the fictional world. If you read Tom Jones, you will find out varieties of characters coming with the different norms in front of us. You'll find various human natures have been brought in front of us. The human nature of benevolence, passion, eternal fitness of thing, or the human mind as a sinking iniquity or ideality of natural inclinations, various kinds of human passions and experiences. You can find it out in Tom Jones. I'm not taking the names of the characters because I know most of you have not read this particular text. That's why you're not familiar with the names of the characters. But various human shades have been presented in this particular novel. Now each norm in this asserts a certain kind of value at the expense of others. Because you cannot justify value on a single hand. You need to compare it. You need to find it out with others. How can you able to do that? Because each value tends to contract the image of human nature to a single principle or to a single perspective. It is trying to have an image of human nature, compare one to one. And therefore, the reader is impelled by the unfinished nature of the text, because the text is unfinished, to relate the values of hero to the various norms which are violated by heroes in certain specific incidences. The hero can behave as per the requirement, and you have certain ideal picture of hero in your mind. Not essential that the hero should follow that ideal picture thoroughly. Only the reader can actualize the degree to which the particular norms are to be rejected or questioned. Only reader can do this, who can reject or question certain norms. Only reader can make a complex and moral judgment on hero, and see that, well, the hero's good nature disrupt the restrictive norms of other characters. How his good nature disturbs the whole norms of other characters also. If you read Tom Jones, Henry Fielding does not tell us all those things very frankly, very openly. But as a readers, we insert this into the interpretation. No writer will tell you that this is going to happen. You have to insert your interpretation in order to fill the gap or blank that we have discussed in a couple of days back. There are gaps and blanks in every understanding. And this was the key term in Iser's theory, the blank or gap. If you see in our real life also, we sometimes meet people who appear to be or who appear to represent a certain worldview, and we assign such descriptions on these people with the received ideas, the ideas which we have received, either with value system or experience or norms. The value system which we encounter are met at certain random points. It is not at a fixed point. So no author, my friends, when writing a text, selects or predetermines this value system, and even no hero appears to test the validity of the value system. So there are always gaps in the text, and those gaps need to be filled. The text is much more definitely structured than life. Please understand this, because you are fulfilling the gaps in the text. Life doesn't allow you to fulfill the gaps in your real sense. If we apply the same Iser's method to our Wordsworth's poem, we see the whole, we see that reader's activity. When reader starts reading the poem of 8 lines, he firstly tries to get the meaning of the first 2 lines, which we bracketed as A. Then he tries to adjust with the 4 lines, try to get the meaning from those 4 lines. First he tried with 2, then he tries to get the meaning with 4, then he tries to get meaning with 6, and then he tries to get the whole meaning by understanding the 8 lines and try to find out the meaning of the poem. Now there are always blanks in every 2 stanzas, and the reader is trying to fulfill the gap. Now, it is a short poem of 8 lines, that's why it will be easy for you to find out the gaps. But when you're reading the novel, the concept of gaps remains valid. The concept of gaps remains the same, that there is a gap always after every line, after every sentence, after every paragraph, after every end of the text. The gap remains the same. It is applied to all kinds of literature. It is applied to all kinds of genres of literature, I may say. If you read drama, you have to find out the gaps in between those 2 lines, hidden between the 2 sentences. My friends, as we have suggested, that it remains unclear whether Iser wishes to grant the reader the complete power to fill up the blanks in the text, or whether he regards the text as the final arbitrator of reader's actualization. Who is fulfilling the reader or the text giving a chance, or text projecting certain gaps and trying to show that, okay, this is the gap, can be filled up from this particular thing? Is the gap between the perfect man and the perfect man's lack of judgment filled by a freely judging reader or by a reader who is guided by the text's instruction? Whether the text is guiding certain instruction? Friends, Iser's emphasis is ultimately phenomenological. The reader's experience of reading is at the center of every literary process. By resolving the contradictions between various viewpoints which emerge from the text, or by filling the gaps between the viewpoints in various ways, the readers take the text into their consciousness and make it their own experience. It seems that while text do set the terms on which the reader actualizes his meanings, the reader's own store of experience will take some part in the process. The reader's existing consciousness will have to make certain internal adjustments in order to receive and process the alien viewpoints which the text presents as the reading takes place. This situation precisely produces the possibility that the reader's own worldview may be modified by as a result of internalizing or negotiating or realizing the partially indeterminate elements of text. If you try to use Iser's word in this regard, what Iser used to say, reading gives us the chance to formulate the unformulated. Reading always gives us a chance to formulate the unformulated. This is how the whole process goes on in reader's mind while reading the text. This is what Wolfgang Iser pointed out about the reading or reception theory. We'll stop here and continue tomorrow.